In April 1925, a British colonel walked into the river system that carries a fifth of all the fresh water that reaches the world's oceans. He was hunting a lost city. His son was with him and his son's best friend. The Royal Geographical Society funded the trip. A century later, the society still doesn't know what happened to any of the three men. That fifth of the world's fresh water moves through more than 1,000 tributaries, and most of them still haven't been fully surveyed. Some of what is down there is measured, confirmed, and closed. Some of it is still being actively argued about by working scientists in published journals right now, and at least one stretch of it is documented to kill anything that falls in seconds flat. These are 10 things about the Amazon River system that remain unresolved, counted down from strange to genuinely inexplicable. And the last one is the story this video just opened on. Number 10. The line where two rivers refuse to mix. Start with the part of the river you can watch change color with your own eyes. Near Manaus, Brazil, two rivers meet. The Rio Negro runs dark, almost black, stained by tannins from decomposing vegetation upstream, warm and slightly acidic. The Sulphur runs pale and sandy brown, carrying sediment down from the Andes, several degrees cooler and moving noticeably faster. Where they meet, they don't blend. They run side by side, a visible seam between two rivers, sharp enough to photograph from a tour boat and clear enough to show up in satellite imagery from orbit. Records confirm the physical cause. Differences in temperature, density, current speed, and chemistry keep the waters from mixing on contact. That much isn't in dispute. What is exactly how long the boundary survives downstream? Different published measurements put full mixing anywhere from a few kilometers out to well over 80. The two rivers agree on why they resist each other. Nobody's nailed down exactly how long either one remembers it. That is the boundary you can see. The next one is a boundary that, by the ocean's own rules, shouldn't exist at all. Number 9. The reef that shouldn't be there. The Amazon doesn't stop being strange when it reaches the ocean. Its freshwater plume pushes out into the open Atlantic, confirmed by satellite tracking, to travel over 1,000 kilometers from the river mouth, part of a discharge that accounts for roughly a fifth of all the fresh water any river delivers to the ocean. Worldwide plumes like that are usually where reef systems die. Fresh water, heavy sediment, and blocked sunlight are exactly the conditions coral can't survive. In 2016, a Brazilian research team publishing in the journal Science Advances mapped something that had no business being there, a reef system stretching roughly 1,000 kilometers along the seafloor, thriving inside the plume itself. Their own expedition had gone looking for something else entirely. The reef turned up almost by accident, and the researchers who found it described bringing up specimens unlike anything they'd cataloged before. How something that needs clear water survives inside one of the muddiest plumes on the planet is still being investigated. The reef was documented years ago. The mechanism that keeps it alive wasn't the mouth of the river, keeps surprising the people who study it. So does what is living upstream, inside it. Number 8. The eel nobody knew existed. For 250 years, the scientific record said exactly one species of electric eel lived in South America, first described by Carl Linnaeus himself. Researchers only confirmed that record was wrong in 2019. A Smithsonian-led genetic study, sequencing more than 100 eels collected across 4 countries, found that one species was actually 3, each living in a different kind of water. One of the 2 newly identified species, Electrophorus voltae, found on the high clear rivers of the Brazilian Shield, was measured discharging up to 860 volts, the strongest electrical output ever recorded from a living animal. More than 200 volts past the previous record, and roughly 7 times what comes out of a household wall socket. These are not small, easily overlooked fish. Some specimens run 7 to 8 feet long. The lead researcher's own point, made at the time, if an eel that size can go unrecognized for 2.5 centuries of active field study, it raises the obvious question of what else in that river system hasn't been cataloged yet. 250 years to notice a new species hiding in plain sight. It is not the only thing this river system has been hiding. Number 7. The river that feeds 2 oceans. In the forested border country of southern Venezuela, a river does something classical hydrology says shouldn't happen. It splits. Part of its water flows north, staying with the Orinoco toward the Caribbean. The rest is diverted more than 200 miles south along a channel called the Cassiquiare into the Rio Negro, and from there into the Amazon. The elevation change over that entire distance is barely 30 meters. So flat it is almost invisible on a map for centuries. European cartographers refused to draw it. Some invented mountains rather than accept that a single river could feed two separate ocean-bound systems at once. It took the explorer Alexander von Humboldt navigating the full length of the channel in 1800 to prove the maps wrong, though local communities had already been using it as a water route between the two basins long before he arrived. 200 years on, hydrologists studying that same channel have found it isn't static. It is estimated to be actively pulling more of the Orinoco's headwaters into the Amazon basin over time, one river system slowly annexing another, a process some researchers describe structurally as one river stealing another. Exactly how far and how fast is still being modeled, not settled. It is the same basin, incidentally, that comes up again at number 1. That same basin has a smaller reputation problem, less about geography, more about what people believe is swimming in it. Number 6, the fish everyone fears, and what happened when a scientist checked. Of every creature blamed for river horror stories in the Amazon, none has a worse reputation than the candiru, a small, translucent, parasitic catfish accused for 2 centuries of swimming up a stream of urine and lodging itself inside a person. The fear is old. A German naturalist recorded it from locals in 1829. A French naturalist recorded a nearly identical account in 1855. In 1997, a urologist in Manaus reported operating for 2 hours to remove exactly that from a patient, and the case was filmed. 2 years later, marine biologist Stephen Spott investigated it directly. The footage, the written report, the preserved specimen itself. What he found didn't hold up. The fish was measured at over 11 millimeters wide, far too large to have forced its way in without an anatomy. It doesn't have. Later laboratory tests, exposing candiru to urine and other chemical attractants directly, found the fish didn't respond to it at all. The fish is real. Its actual habit, wedging into the gills of larger fish to feed on blood, a genuine parasitic behavior documented since the 19th century, is real. The one part of the legend that was ever put in front of a scientist collapsed the moment someone checked it. Not every belief about what is in this river turns out to be false when someone checks it. Number 5, the dolphin that comes ashore. If you ask communities along the Middle Amazon about the pink river dolphin, most won't just describe an animal to you. The boto is real, Inia geoffrensis, one of the last freshwater dolphin species left on Earth, with a proportionally large brain and an ability to navigate waters so murky that sight is nearly useless. It genuinely does turn pinker with age. A documented pattern researchers connect to scarring from social and territorial behavior between males, though the exact biological mechanism behind the color shift itself isn't fully mapped even now. That is the confirmed biology. Running alongside it, generations old and still told today, is the encantado, a dolphin that comes ashore after dark as a handsome man in white, charms his way through a riverside gathering, and returns to the water by morning, careful, the stories say, to keep his hat on to hide the blowhole he can't fully disguise. Researchers who study the region don't treat this as a story that needs correcting. It is described as a real working framework communities use to talk about what the river might hide after nightfall. And it is respected here as exactly that. 5 entries left. 2 of them are about creatures stranger than anything so far. One is a piece of the river's deep past that geologists genuinely can't agree on. And the last one closes the loop this video opened on. Number 4, the living fossil that has to breathe air. In the Amazon's flooded forests lives one of the oldest fish body plans on the planet, the Arapaima, a lineage whose basic shape has barely changed in tens of millions of years, and that can grow to nearly the length of a canoe. It is also one of the strangest breathers in the entire river system, an obligate air gulper, forced to surface every 10 to 15 minutes for a breath or drown. an adaptation to water so oxygen-poor that most other fish sharing the same channel can't survive in it at all. You can hear them coming up before you see them, a distinctive gulp breaking the surface of a flooded forest at dawn. By the late 20th century, overfishing had wiped the species from huge stretches of its former range. Community-managed protection in some reserves, counted and monitored season by season rather than banned outright, has since brought parts of that population back, one of the genuine conservation successes to come out of the region in recent decades. How many arapaima still exist in the river's less surveyed side channels, cut off from the main current for months at a time by the annual flood cycle, is still not fully known. That is how the river behaves right now. What it did with its own water tens of millions of years ago is a far stranger story. Number 3. The river that used to flow backward. The Amazon runs west to east today, from the Andes to the Atlantic. That has not always been true. In 2006, a geologist studying sediment deep in the river's interior found something that didn't fit the current map at all: tiny mineral grains, crystals of zircon, that could only have eroded from mountains far to the east, not the younger Andes to the west. That meant one thing: tens of millions of years ago, this same river system ran in the opposite direction entirely, draining toward the Pacific instead of the Atlantic. What actually reversed it is still argued between two research groups. One model, out of the University of North Carolina, points to slow shifts in rock deep within the Earth's mantle, tilting the whole basin over millions of years. A competing study published in 2014 out of the University of São Paulo ran computer simulations and concluded that ordinary surface erosion off the rising Andes did the work instead. No deep mantle shift required, just sediment, rainfall, and time. Two named research teams, two different mechanisms. One river that spent most of its geological life flowing the wrong way by today's map, with no consensus yet on why it changed its mind. That is the river arguing with geologists about its own past. The next one argues with basic geology about why it is still doing what it is doing right now. Number 2, the river that borders. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, roughly 700 kilometers from the nearest active volcano. Far enough that by every standard geological model, what is about to be described shouldn't be possible. There is a river that boils. Local Ashvaninka communities have described it for generations by a name that translates to boiled by the heat of the sun. Geothermal scientist Andrafase Yuzo first heard about it as a boy from his grandfather and spent years afterward wondering if it was real before he was finally guided to it in 2011. Measured temperatures along its length reached nearly 100 degrees Celsius, with the single hottest reading ever recorded there just above 99. If you fell into the hottest stretch of it, survival wouldn't be a matter of luck. The documented record shows small animals that fall in do not come back out. The heat has been traced to deep geological faults carrying superheated water up from far below, independent of any volcano. A combination researchers say has no confirmed match anywhere else on Earth at this scale. There is a further wrinkle scientists are still chasing: heat-loving microbes living in water this hot have, in other geothermal systems around the world, produced enzymes valuable enough to reshape entire fields of laboratory science. Nobody yet knows what is living in this one. The mechanism heating the river is well supported. The exact underground plumbing producing that much heat, with nothing burning beneath it, is still being mapped. It kills anything that falls into it, and scientists can prove exactly how. What happened to 3 men who walked into this same river system in 1925 has never been proven at all. Number 1. The man the river never gave back. Percy Harrison Fawcett had been a Fellow of the Royal Geographical Society since 1901. And by the 1920s, one of the most experienced South American surveyors of his generation, a man who had already spent nearly 2 decades mapping some of the most contested, least charted border territory on the continent, and who had become convinced, partly inspired by the rediscovery of Machu Picchu in 1911, that a lost complex civilization once existed somewhere in the Brazilian interior. He called it Only Z's. In April 1925, he set out from Cuab Fay with his 22-year-old son, Jack, and Jack's closest friend, Raleigh Ramel. following the Xingwu River system, a major southeastern artery of the Amazon, toward the place he believed it stood. He kept the party deliberately small on purpose, planned to live off the land, brought 2 Brazilian laborers only part of the way, and told his own support team not to attempt a rescue if the group didn't return on schedule. His last confirmed communication was a letter sent back down the river from a camp he and his men had nicknamed Dead Horse Camp, dated May 29, 1925, telling his wife they were in good health and pushing on. Then, nothing. 2 years later, the Royal Geographical Society officially declared the party lost and funded the first of what became years of search expeditions, several of which ended in tragedy for the searchers themselves, including one led by the brother of the man who would later create James Bond. Over the following decades, witnesses came forward with accounts that directly contradicted each other, that Fawcett had gone native and was living somewhere in the jungle by choice, that he'd been taken captive, that one specific community was responsible for the deaths of all 3 men. In 1952, one investigator claimed to have recovered bones belonging to Fawcett. The identification was never conclusively confirmed. No wreckage has ever been found. No grave has ever been verified. No account from any community along that river system has been independently corroborated. Nearly a century later, the same institution that funded his search still lists his fate as unresolved, and large stretches of the river system he vanished into remain, today, almost exactly as unmapped as they were in 1925. Cryptic Finds keeps a running note on which of these 10 hold up and which don't. As new research surfaces, Fawcett's case especially, since new expedition records still turn up every few years, that tracking happens for subscribers first. 100 years ago, a river system this size could swallow 3 men and the truth of what happened to them. Whole, it has been surveyed more since then. It has not been solved. Somewhere in the part of it that is still never been mapped, that is either a comforting thought or exactly the wrong one.